Tesla is revolutionizing the auto industry. What does that mean for your finances?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I get excited about every single show that we do. I just think that what we do is fun. But I cannot remember a show in recent memory, unless perhaps it was some of our other Tesla content, which if you haven't had a chance to check that out, make sure you go do that you have been this excited to go through.
This has been a pet project that's been in the works for probably 5 to 6 months.
Months and months and months.
We had full-time equivalent Daniel crunching some numbers for us, but it just didn't work. We had an editorial calendar, but now we've reached the point, and I think, by the way, it was meant to be delayed because Tesla has updated their pricing. They've dropped things down. We didn't take into account any type of tax credits or anything. This is a true apples-to-apples test. We wanted to kind of figure out, where does Tesla fall in your auto decision making, and also how does it fall within 23.8? And then this also, there's been a lot of press recently. I mean, in both good and bad. And on the good side, I mean, Tesla's numbers are really strong, meaning they've had a lot of demand. But then on the bad side, J.D. Powers came out and they ranked the reliability factor a little lower on Tesla, which was kind of disappointing. So I wanted to kind of take a double take or measure twice on what's going on with Tesla, and then understand what that means for you and your financial decision making in the future. So this is kind of the culmination of all that.
One thing that I think is interesting, Brian, is we always talk about when it comes to making an auto decision purchase, you kind of have to figure out what kind of auto buyer you are. Am I someone who buys like, the standard, old, reliable brand, or am I someone who buys like a luxury brand? Well, we've always had the conversation in the past that, okay, if you're going to buy a Tesla, that's a luxury automobile. That's in the luxury brand category. But as we started doing some research, I think perhaps maybe our thought process on that could be shifting.
It could definitely be evolving, and I think it's because I want to kind of jump into this because I know people are going to be curious to know the answers to these things. So let's kind of get into it. The first thing I realized, because we had we were talking about things we wanted to answer. First thing I want to know is Tesla going to be the brand of millionaires? Because you can't watch a TV show where they talk about somebody that's in technology or a successful businessman or a woman, and they typically, in all the movies and TV shows, they're driving a Tesla. So, but in the past, it's been Model S, Model X. Those are the more expensive versions. But Model 3s are out now. Model Ys are just starting to show up on the scene. By the way, they're not even included in this analysis. That'll be something we can do in the future. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But here's what I thought was interesting. I've often thought, man, it's amazing when we did our Tesla content, how well that hit with people who watched the show. Yeah. So we actually pulled up the demographics of what is the typical Tesla Model 3 driver look like.
Sure. So who actually buys a Tesla? Well, this is what we found. And all this data is from Hedges and Company. We found that the average household income for Tesla owners is a touch over $128,000. We found that Model 3 owners are vast majority men. It's 84% male. The median age of Model 3 owners is 46 years old, so you're nailing that one. And then we found that 56% were homeowners. They aren't renters. They're actually folks who own their home.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because, by the way, Model S and X, the more expensive versions, the average age pushes up to 52, 54. 52 for the Model X, 54 for the Model S. I also thought it was interesting is that I am 46 years of age, so I kind of fit right there. The average for all car buyers, if you look at the entire population, is 38 years of age. And then here's something, because we're nerdy, we went down a whole rabbit hole, Bo. Because you were like, man, that's old. And I was like, Bo, if you think that's old, let's talk about Ferraris, let's talk about Porsches, let's talk about Corvettes. Yep. So here's what we found. The average age for a Ferrari purchaser, 51 years of age. Years old. Average age for a person buying a Porsche, 52 years of age. Average age for somebody buying a Corvette, a Chevrolet Corvette, 59 years of age. Yep. So 46, actually pretty young. So it's somewhat interesting. So here's what the next thing we said. Okay, so if this is what the typical Tesla buyer now looks like, they're obviously high income. They're people who value technology,
more established in their life,
more established. What does this mean for the auto industry in general? And we want to kind of create a peer group of what vehicle should you compare a Tesla to. So the first one up was BMW.
Love it.
Because what is BMW? Is the ultimate driving machine.
That's
That
right.
is what was marketed for years. This is what drivers drive. Well, then Tesla comes about, and here's what's interesting about Tesla. The battery sits underneath where you drive it, so it's very evenly weighted. It's got a low center of gravity. These things drive like sports cars. Yep. They're also, as Elon Musk says, he doesn't make a slow Tesla. There is not a such thing as a slow Tesla. So we said, well, let's compare, because if you have the ultimate driving machine, that's BMW.
Yep.
How does that compare? And we even did kind of a more, performance-based BMW Model 3.
So
go ahead.
So let's look at the performance specs if you kind of just compare the two. And we went with the 3 Series, the M340i all-wheel drive versus the Tesla Model 3 all-wheel drive. We did the long-range version, right? Yep. So if we're going to compare sort of luxury to luxury, we want to look at the luxury version of the Model 3.
Sure.
We'll look at a different one in a second. What we found is that from a horsepower perspective, the BMW comes in at 382 horsepower. Tesla Model 3 long range comes in at 346. So BMW does have it edged out just a touch.
Yep.
If we look at the one thing you hear from Tesla all the time is how quickly it can accelerate. Well, if you look at 0 to 60 miles per hour, the BMW is at 4.1 seconds. Tesla actually edges it out just a hair at 4.0 seconds. Now, that caught me by surprise because
I knew it.
When I hear these Tesla fanatics, I'm going to throw you in that category. The one thing I always hear is, man, how fast it accelerates. Man, how fast it takes off. When I see this, it looks kind of the same to me as the 3 Series.
Look, this is a financial show. So we wanted to think about the finances. We're balancing the performance with the finances. If you want the fastest version, you can spend a few $1,000s more and get the performance version of the Tesla Model 3. It will drop another second off of this. We can get into the low 3s.
Okay, so that does make a difference.
But I wanted to be fair to trying to do an apples to apples where you're balancing both the financial decisions as well as the performance decisions.
And then the last spec we want to look at was top speed. The BMW comes in at a top speed. Why do you chuckle? At 155 miles an hour, it does edge out the Tesla Model 3 at 145
Well,
miles
because
per
when
hour.
I see this stat, I did an informal survey around the office today, and I said, what's the fastest you've ever driven? And the fastest I think I've ever been, I'm embarrassed to say I was probably in my, teenage years,
yeah.
And I was really ragging out the poor Ragalier, giving it all she had. And I think I got up to 110 miles per hour.
In the Cavalier, you got it to 110?
I mean, that thing was shaking. I mean, it's not made for that speed. I think its comfortable speed was around 50 miles per hour. So at 110, I think that rivets were coming out and screws. It was just not a good experience. When I asked you, you said your mother growing up was pulled over doing 107 miles per hour on the way to baseball practice.
We were on the way from Panama City Beach and I had baseball practice that day, so we had to get there on time. So this was like a 7-hour trip. Apparently 100 miles an hour is going to do it.
And then Rebe, our producer, when I asked her, I think she says, I think I might have been 90 miles per hour. And I was like, Rebe, I think I did that on the way to the beach like a few weeks ago. So it was just kind of funny seeing all the different personalities.
Yeah.
Whenever I see stats, and when Full-Time Equivalent put this in, and I'm glad he put it in, but nobody's driving 145 miles per hour. If you are, I hope I'm not on the road while you're there.
So, okay, if I'm looking at this, just performance specs alone, I'm going to say, if we're just comparing apples to apples here, it looks like the BMW does edge it out just a hair, but perhaps it doesn't make that big of a difference. Perhaps there isn't that big of a difference between 380 horsepower versus 340, or a top speed of 145 versus 155.
Well, realize when you're doing that, the horsepowers, that's always it's a hard thing to calculate when you're comparing an electric vehicle compared to a traditional combustible engine, because Tesla's, some of the biggest fun ratio you're going to get is that right off the line instant torque.
Sure.
It's hard to compete with that. So I disagree with you a little. I think that the Tesla edges it out. But here's what's going to push the needle completely over a little bit. Let's go into the numbers.
So let's talk a little bit about the finance. Is a Tesla, the Model 3 that we're talking about, the all-wheel drive long range, is it less expensive than a BMW if we look at the cost of ownership over the first 5 years? That's kind of what we want to compare. First 60 months of ownership. Well, this is what we found. The initial cost for a BMW 3 Series is just a touch under $54,000. For the Tesla Model 3, it's just under $47,000. And I love that Full-Time Equivalent, Daniel, put this in there, paid in cash. Because if we're talking about luxury automobiles, we don't finance those. We pay them off inside of the first year. So $54,000 versus $47,000.
Right.
So then we got to think about maintenance and repairs. If we look at maintenance costs for the BMW 3 Series, it comes in at about $9,400 over the first 5 years. Maintenance and service for the Tesla Model 3, about $2,700.
Well, we had to, let's be honest here. Now, look, I've owned, like my wife has an Audi.
Sure.
All these European cars, that's your biggest sticker shock, is after you buy it, you then start going through the service applications, or the service, when we get to 10,000 miles, 20,000, you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing driving this car? Because even an oil change is a lot more expensive than it should be. And then you find out some maintenance is a lot more. Tesla, but to make this even fair, we did some craziness, because listen to some of the stuff I had Daniel put in here. We assumed 2 new sets of tires.
Okay.
We assumed that 7 tire rotation and alignments.
Okay.
We did 2 new cabin air filters.
Got to do that.
And then we did 5 sets of windshield wipers.
Oh, so we really thought about
because
everything.
we had to try really hard to get it up to 2763. Because I've owned a Tesla now for 2 years, and here's what I find interesting. You forget to rotate the tires, because you usually rotate the tires when you change the oil.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have any oil to change. You don't use brake pads in a Tesla because it has the regenerative braking. So when you take your foot off the gas, it brings the car to a stop. So you're not even really using the brake at all. So there's no brake pads to replace, but every 300,000 or 400,000 miles. I'll be surprised if I can change mine at 300,000 or 400,000 miles. So it really is. That's why we had to really search long and hard, and that's why tire rotations, changing tires, windshield wipers, it's stuff like that, but you can see it's night and day on what the maintenance of these 2 cars are.
So let's talk about the big one that most people talk about when they think about going electric. Let's look at the costs in gas versus electricity. So obviously BMW has to have a higher caliber gasoline that you put in there. So the first 5-year cost on the internal combustible engine is $8,000 for the BMW, compared with the electricity cost of just under $2,800 for the Model 3.
So here's what went into those numbers, because I know people are going to be curious. We didn't put everything in here because we want to keep this simple to understand from a visual standpoint. But we assumed 15,000 miles per year for both vehicles. We for the BMW, because it gets 26 miles a gallon, we figured that's 577 gallons of gas. Because they use premium fuel. Unfortunately, fuel is cheap right now. So premium fuel was $2.78 a gallon because they require premium. And then so that comes out to be about $1,605 per year, or $8,025 for 5 years.
For the first 5, yep.
For a Tesla, it's a little different, because Tesla's, it works out to, it's about 0.037, so 4 cents a mile.
Okay.
That's what a Tesla works out to. At 15,000 miles per year, that's $555 a year, or works out to $2,775 over 5 years.
So if we add up all these, for the initial cost of ownership, well, when you look at the BMW 3 Series, it's just over $71,000. Tesla Model 3 is only at $52,500. So if we just stop there, it appears as though in the first 5 years, the Tesla is the better deal, is less expensive than the BMW.
I mean, I got to go ahead and tell you, you had a loaner car. Your wife has a Mercedes, and the loaner car you were driving was a sedan while they were doing some work on it. And you did call me. You said, Brian, who would buy this over a Tesla?
It did not. I've ridden your car so much, I could not get my head wrapped around the initial price tag of what that Mercedes coupe would cost relative to what you get in a Model 3 for. It didn't equate to me. And now when you look at this, it equates even less to
But
me.
wait, there's more, because we know. Now, look, if you're the type of person that's buying these type of vehicles, you don't want to get stuck with the long-term maintenance of a European car, because that's where they eat you alive. When people tell me, hey, you can get a used Mercedes or a used BMW, I'm like, yeah, you know why? It's because people realize how much it costs to maintain these vehicles, so they get rid of them, and the poor person that buys these vehicles used is stuck holding the bag on what these things cost. So let's look at the resale value, because that is the other part of the equation. We assumed, now look, I don't want anybody driving a car for just 5 years. Because I think a car is only getting warmed up after 5 years of ownership. Maybe even Tesla is not even getting warmed up at that point. It might still be breaking the basic plastic wrap on it, because we're going to talk more about that in a minute, of what you can expect out of your Tesla over the long term. But consider what resale value does on these 2 vehicles.
So again, we went and pulled the data. If you look at the BMW 3 Series, it has a resale value after 5 years based on that initial starting price of about $25,000. So if you think about the initial cost of ownership minus what you could get for resale, The total cost of ownership over a 5-year life of the automobile is about $46,000.
That's a lot of depreciation, by the way.
It's a lot of depreciation. So then we look at the Tesla Model 3, and we know that 5-year-old Teslas now retain about 55% of their initial value. So again, your resale value is roughly the same, a little bit higher, about $26,000.
Your starting point was a lot lower,
Starting point was a lot lower. So our total cost of ownership for the Tesla over the full 5-year cycle, a little bit less than $27,000.
So this almost seems like an unfair analysis because, I mean, you are asking yourself, why would anybody buy one of these European entry-level luxury vehicles when you could buy the Tesla if there's this much of a financial difference? And by the way, just so y'all don't think, man, these guys, this was such in the bag. I can't believe that they were so in the side of Tesla on this. I want to show you what is actually going on out there in the market right now. This is some research we found, and now this is from January 2019 to June of 2019. I want you to notice Tesla Model 3 is smoking all the other entry-level luxury brands. And here's something else that I think is quite interesting and bodes well for Tesla. Every vehicle on this list, sans the Mercedes C-Class and the Tesla Model 3, are entry-level SUVs.
SUVs, yeah.
All of these, the Tesla, the Lexus RX, the Acura RDX, the BMW X3, X5, the Lexus NX, I mean, the Cadillac XTS, these are all SUVs. So what's coming out this year is, and you're starting to see these on the street now, especially around here, is you're seeing the Tesla Model Y, which is the more affordable SUV version of the Model 3.
So I think what you're probably predicting is that once the Model Y data does come in, relative to these other smaller or mid-size SUVs, it's probably going to be even more stark.
Well, they're predicting that the Model Y will actually be more successful than the Model 3 because more people, as this data shows, want an SUV. You've even said it yourself. You like having a hatch in the back that can put things in the back more than you want to have a trunk or a hatchback.
That's exactly right.
So, I mean, this is pretty telling, and I think that this does show that our research is not off. There are starting to be big seismic shifts to what's going on in the automotive industry. So this leads me to think about, okay, so this is what's going on in near luxury. And we talk about all the time, I don't want you financing any car outside of basic cars like the Honda Accords, the Toyota Camrys, and those things, because I know you need dependable transportation to get to work. Anytime you go into luxury, that's your BMW, that's your Mercedes. In the past, I've said that is Tesla. Maybe I still am. I've considered you better pay essentially cash for those vehicles because otherwise you're faking your life. Because if you're spending that premium so you can flex and look all super successful and driving a fancy car, you better do it because you can afford it, not because you just want to look good and you're leveraging your future financial self on that. But you saw how big of a difference there was between the Tesla and the BMW. That leads me to think about, well, wait a minute. Has this thing literally changed the automotive industry to where we should not just be comparing Teslas to a BMW? What about a Honda Accord?
Yeah, this one kind of blew my mind when you said this, because when I had just thought about Tesla being a luxury car. It's something that people in the luxury market would want to buy. But you're right. We just showed that conclusively a Tesla is more economically viable than entry-level BMW, pretty much hands down. And it was such a wide margin that if it does actually begin to compete with like a Honda Accord, well, that changes the whole dynamic of how we even think about the automobile.
So let's I think we have to talk about performance specs. What do you expect out of these vehicles? It was very unique when we talked about the BMW. What happens when we talk about a very reliable, this is considered, because let's face it, there are cars, and I'm guilty of this. If I see you driving certain cars, I'm like, bad decision maker, good decision maker, bad decision. Maybe that's mean that I feel that way, but when I see somebody driving it, I'm like, ooh, I hope they're rich because they're bad decision makers. But Honda Accord has always been one, when you look at Toyota Camrys, Honda Accords, you always think, you know what, that's probably, and by the way, research from the updated version of The Millionaire Next Door that Sarah came out with, Dr. Stanley's daughter, it very much showed that Toyota and Honda hold a high esteem, a high place in a lot of the purchasing power for millionaires. So I've actually had a very good opinion of Honda Accord purchasers. What happens when we look at the stats?
So we're going to look at the Honda Accord EXL, so that's one of the nice, the 2.0T, versus the Tesla Model 3 short range. So we're not going to do the all-wheel drive Tesla. We're not going to do the long-range version. We're going to just look at sort of what I would say the entry-level Model 3.
Yeah, the affordable.
Right?
And by the way, we did the EXL 4-cylinder. We didn't do the V6 engine. We did the 4-cylinder because probably if you're somebody who's buying an electric vehicle, you're more concerned about the efficiency than the straight-up power. Now, remember, Tesla, you're going to get power. They don't make slow cars, but it is, I think that's how we landed on the fact that we wanted nice, but we wanted it to be efficient, if you're wondering how we chose the Honda version.
So from a horsepower perspective, the Honda Accord has 252 horsepower. The Tesla Model 3 does edge it out at 283. For a 0 to 60, the Honda Accord can do that in 5.6 seconds. The Tesla Model 3, actually 5.3. And you mentioned if you do the performance version, it actually brings that down some. But 5.3.
Brings it down to low threes. But you can see, this is, and the reason this is because Tesla, they do slow them down, and it's got, I think they, I'm trying to remember, and I should know this. I think the Model 3 still has a 75 battery, but they limit what it can do performance-wise.
And then if we think about top speed, the Honda Accord goes 155 miles an hour. I've never actually seen a Honda Accord going down 155 miles an hour.
I don't know if their tires are even rated to go that fast.
And the Tesla tops out at 140 miles an hour. But again, when I look at these performance specs, they seem fairly comparable to me. It doesn't like it's a landslide one way or the other.
So now it's probably going to fall to, and this is a financial discussion. Nobody is buying either one of these vehicles going, man, I can't wait to bury that speedometer to 140 miles per hour. Nobody's doing it. This is an efficiency purchase. You're a person that wants to get from point A to point B. You want to do it comfortably. You want to do it efficiently. You're not a flex person. This is a good decision maker just trying to figure out what's the right economic decision.
So let's look at the financial impact. Is a Tesla, in fact, cheaper than a Honda Accord if you compare the first 5 years of ownership? Well, this is what we found. For initial cost, and remember, you have to pay cash for this one because if we're not going to be talking about luxury brands, it's okay to do $23,800 on this purchase. That's 20% down. Don't finance for any longer than 3 years, and don't let your payment exceed more than 8% of your gross income. So if we just look at starting sticker on the Honda Accord, it's about $32,000. The Tesla Model 3 short range is a little more expensive. It is about $39,000 out of the gate.
Now, I will tell you, when we did pre-show prep, you're like, that's a big deal,
That's
Brian.
a bit, when it comes to buying a car, when I think about spending 32 versus 39, that's pretty material to me. That seems like a big
So that
big
might,
chunk.
in your head, if you have the needle going one way or the other, that difference right there is probably weighing pretty heavily on you.
But we know that when it comes to buying a car, it's not just about the initial purchase, it's about all the other things that come into it. So if we look at the maintenance and service costs, on the Honda Accord, it's about $4,300 over that 5-year period. The Tesla Model 3 comes in at just under $2,800.
And remember, we had to get aggressive with that. That's got multiple tire purchases. That's got lots of tire rotations. That's even got multiple sets of windshield wiper replacements. We try to throw the kitchen sink because there's really just not that much maintenance that goes into a Tesla. And by the way, Honda Accord's very efficient. That's not even that crazy of a number for them either.
And remember, when we compared to the BMW, we looked at gas costs. That's what a lot of people think about, is what are the fuel costs relative to electricity costs? That's where we think the savings will be. Well, Honda Accords are super fuel efficient, and they take lower level gasoline if you're going to fill them up. So for gas and electricity costs over the first 5 years, the Honda Accord comes in at $5,600, and the Tesla Model 3 comes in again right under $2,800.
And just to remind you, because I know we've already covered some of these numbers, what's great about the Honda is it doesn't require premium gasoline. So since the average cost per gallon is around $2.18 a gallon, the vehicle gets 29 miles per gallon is what it's rated at. So you can quickly do the math on that and figure out that it's going to be right at $1,127 a year, or $5,635 over the 5 years. And then when we talk about the Tesla, because both of these are rated at 15,000 miles a year, we want to do an apples to apples. It's costing approximately 4 cents a mile with the Tesla is how we got to that. So that's how it all worked out to do an apples to apples analysis.
So if we look at the total initial cost of ownership, to buy the Honda Accord EXL, it's about $42,000 over that 5-year period. The Tesla Model 3 comes in at about $45,000. So it is a little more expensive to buy the Model 3 than to buy the Honda Accord. Okay?
Yeah, well, but it made some ground up on the cost of, fuel or electricity. It made up some on the maintenance, but still the Honda Accord is looking really strong in the fact that it didn't require a lot of money just to get into the vehicle.
That's right. So we know that initial cost is only one piece of it. We want to think about, well, which one of these cars holds their value well? So if we look at the total cost of ownership, we also have to think about the cost of resale. So if we think about the Honda Accord, which is known as a car that generally holds its resale value very well, you can resell it in 5 years for $17,468. So if you look at that, the total cost of ownership over that 5-year period is a little over $24,000.
All right.
Well, the Tesla Model 3 we've already talked about retains about 55% of its initial value, so it's going to have about a $21,000 resale value, so a little bit stronger than that of the Honda Accord, for a total cost of ownership over the first 5 years of right at $24,000. In our analysis, it's about a $400 difference between the two.
So I got to tell you, this blew my mind a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Now, because it does make you think, is Tesla the brand that we could recommend that you could finance? That it's not a luxury brand if you're buying like the short range edition, the entry level edition. This makes you think. I will tell you, though, I think I'm still, if I was putting the needle on a decision point, I'm not willing to change my rules on Tesla being a luxury brand
car,
yet. And the big driving factor on that is the fact that it still has a purchase price that is substantially, I think it was close to $8,000 initial out-of-pocket amount of money. I know it makes it back in fuel costs as well as maintenance or electricity. I know everybody's going who's in EV industry. They'll be like, why is he saying fuel? The cost of running the vehicle, yes, there's areas to make it up, but it's a great opportunity in the fact that they're making progress. I mean, because here's the thing. 6 months ago, this wasn't even close because Tesla dropped the price $2,000 recently. So this thing is getting better. I will tell you, so there's a reason the average age is 46. I think a 25-year-old, a 30-year-old, this is pretty compelling, but I don't know. I mean, I hate to give a recommendation on that.
Well, this is what I think is going to be really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the conversation changes over time. If I personally were in the market for a sedan right now and I was thinking, okay, perhaps I want to buy the Honda Accord or the Toyota Camry or maybe the luxury automobile, Tesla Model 3 will be right there in the conversation for me.
Yeah.
It's going to be really interesting when the Model Y comes out and you start thinking about folks who like to drive SUVs, like to have more space. It's going to be a really interesting decision to make. So I think one of the things to be valuable are what are some of the things that could change that might end up shifting the conversation over?
So here's what's really interesting about the way we did this analysis. We treated, and by the way, I have lost my mind when I see car rating agencies treat Teslas the same as they do conventional cars, meaning that I have seen some of these car rating agencies, even though Teslas have regenerative braking, they've cut that feature off so that the Tesla will drive more like a traditional auto. So when they're measuring stopping distance and other things,
that's one of the things that you like about the Tesla,
but
right?
that's what's weird is they somehow are trying to fit the square box of the Tesla into the round hole, and it just doesn't work. So I've started thinking about this. The way we even did the analysis falls prey to that. And we were talking about this is going to be a 5-year car. What does it cost to own this car for 5 years? Here is why that might be different for a Tesla. Teslas are designed, we've known this for a while now, their motors are designed for 1 million miles. So, but you're like, okay, that's great because there's not as many moving parts in an electric vehicle. It's basically just the motor, the controller, the things that are going to give you air conditioner, but it's just not a lot of moving parts, whereas a combustible engine has hundreds, thousands of parts that it can break and things can go wrong. So reliability is probably really great within an electric vehicle. The problem you run into is the battery. You're like, well, batteries, surely they're going to have to be replaced. And that's going to be an expensive thing. So probably 8 to 10 years, you're going to have to change the battery out. So a typical car is its lifespan is about 150,000 miles. I've already told you the motor on a Tesla can do 1 million miles, but the battery is the big question mark. Well, Elon Musk has been very aggressive. There have been patents filed. They've been doing tons of research trying to get cobalt out of the batteries because it's a very scarce resource. It's hazardous. And then they've also are working, and they filed this patent. Now, it remains to be seen how this gets implemented. But they're talking about they believe they're on the verge of having a 1 million mile battery.
So if I'm thinking about cost of ownership and I'm comparing a Honda Accord that I know could perhaps last me for 200, maybe 300,000 miles if I'm that kind of driver, versus an electric automobile that could last me for 1 million miles, it's not going to be a close economic conversation anymore.
Well, and I think this is why you're seeing brands like Volkswagen and others that are saying we're just getting out of the combustible engine. We're going all electric. Is that this is a technology battle that, and look, I know you guys, I grew up, my dad, my brother restoring classic cars. This is not going to be popular to say, but owning an electric vehicle for 2 years now, it's a superior driving experience. Now, let me go ahead. I've given it all this praise. Let me tell you the negative to owning an electric vehicle. There's a reason my wife has a normal combustible engine SUV, and then I have my electric vehicle. Now, it's great. I never have to go get gas. I just plug it in every few days at the house. Gas stations are places that on road trips, you get snacks and drinks and go to the restroom. You're not having to stop there to fuel up. But road trips, speaking of, it's a little bit of a pain in the rear end a little bit with electric vehicles because you have to charge for 20 to 30 minutes. Sure. Yes, it's great that they have Hulu and YouTube built into your big center screen, but it is one of those things where it's not a 5-minute endeavor or 10-minute endeavor where you gas up and get going. But we are on the verge. I mean, the Model S, they just had a breakthrough, is now can go 400 miles. When they get to electric vehicles going 450 to 500 miles on a one fuel up.
One charge.
One charge. I have to get my terminology. Remember, I grew up with a house full of gearheads, so it's hard to change those terms. We will be reaching a point where just your biological needs to stop, stretch your legs, walk around will probably be okay for you to charge for that 20 to 30 minutes because you'll want to eat, you'll want to go to the restroom, all that stuff. Right now, 200 to 300 miles of range, you could actually want to go further, but the car battery needs to be charged.
So one of the questions that I have, Ron, obviously, okay, there are downsides, but it seems like there are a lot of pros to electric automobiles, specifically the Tesla, specifically the entry-level Teslas, the Model 3s. Why isn't it common knowledge right now that, hey, it's certainly an alternative to luxury cars, but it's even a viable alternative to reasonable non-luxury automobiles. Why is that not just common right now, the common thought?
Well, I've dealt with this a lot, is that let me go ahead and give you one key thing that you've probably not noticed. Because there is bad press out there on Teslas.
Sure.
But here's something I bet you haven't thought about. Do I know any Tesla owners that don't think it's the greatest car they've ever owned? I haven't met one yet.
I know one Tesla owner that will not shut up about it. I hear about it all the time, how incredible this car is.
So what's missing here is here's what a lot of people probably don't realize until I say this. You're like, oh yeah, I've never seen one. Tesla doesn't advertise. Tesla spends $0 on advertising. Now, what makes that unique? The auto industry, the conventional auto industry, the legacy auto industry, in 2018, spent $35.5 billion. They're one of the top advertising sectors. So what does that do? How does the news media make their money? They want your eyes and your ears watching news or watching whatever they're putting in front of you on the TV, the radio, the newsprint, because they're selling advertising. So the sheer fact that Tesla doesn't advertise threatens their cash cow. Because imagine what happens to legacy auto manufacturers if they start losing money.
Sure.
They're not buying as many ads. Well, Tesla's already said, we're not buying ads. So it really puts a conflict of interest. And here's something that I would put out there, because I think it's kind of unique. Now, I've had people say, you must be a horrible decision maker because you bought these cars so close to each other. It was just a matter of, because I bought my wife's Audi, it was an SUV, in November of 2017, and then I got my Tesla Model 3 in April of 2018.
Okay.
So a lot of people, why did you stack the cars? I didn't. It's just when Tesla tells you your car is ready to build. Remember, nobody had Model 3s at the beginning part of 2018. I wanted to be on that early adopter status, so I wasn't ideal, but I did it. So I bought both cars. My wife's car is great on road trips. It's great on a technology standpoint from a 2017, 2018 standpoint, but it's actually not gotten any better.
It's a little antiquated probably now.
So the Tesla, I've gotten software updates. I get software updates probably once a month, if not even twice a month, where things are constantly improving. I'm getting more features added through over-the-air updates, which is pretty incredible. No car has ever done that for me. Think about every car I've ever owned, especially the luxury ones. You get them and you get the GPS. You're all excited about the GPS, and then it's only in year 2 that they're like, well, hey, we'll sell you an updated maps list for a few $100. Or like my wife's Audi. It was beautiful. It has a center display. It has a dashboard display. It has a center display, and they talk about the Google Maps. They talk about the connectivity. It wasn't until a few months into it that all of a sudden I get an offer in the mail that says, "Hey, for $60 a month, we'll let you keep your Google Maps and your connectivity."
So it didn't come with the car.
No, nobody told me this when I was buying the car. So now we have, it looks like it's 1983 in my wife's very expensive SUV because I refuse to pay $60 a month. So I'm back to 2D instead of the Google Maps. Now, look, a lot of you guys, because you're like, well, Tesla has a price too, right? And I'm like, yeah, it's $999. But not only do you get the maps, you're also going to get streaming services through Slacker. There's just a lot more connectivity that you're going to get. And for people like me that bought them so long ago, it was actually included. So this whole $999 is a new thing. But I think the hard part that the legacy auto manufacturers are going to have trouble with is that they don't improve. The car is the same the day you buy it as the day you trade it in, whereas Tesla, once you have over-the-air updates, you're like, why don't all cars do this?
It's actually improving over time.
It doesn't cost, like Audi. You can't tell me Audi has not done a better job with their navigation, with their safety, the self-driving features, the traffic control features, because I got all those gizmos on there, but yet it hasn't been improved because they want me to trade that car in, and believe me, I get solicitations constantly from Audi saying, come trade your car and we can keep your payment the same. Even though my car's been paid off for years, they think everybody finances because I think the majority of people are financing their vehicles, so they're trying to keep me on this rotation of trade your car in every few years to get the better features. Elon Musk, it remains to be seen if he's a good businessman, because he definitely builds an awesome car, but I do worry about the fact if you build a car that lasts 1 million miles, where's the design obsolescence? I mean, because that's part of what auto manufacturers, but I don't think Elon cares.
Yeah.
I think he's figuring out, you know what? We'll have your car working for you. It'll be a taxi ride share. We'll do a 1 million mile car. You'll just go buy. You'll have 4 Teslas in your garage, and that you have working for you and doing all kind of things. Or maybe he thinks, hey, once we get Mars, there'll be a whole other planet to put cars on. I mean, who knows what Tesla is thinking? And that leads to kind of my closing point. I'm going to put this up on the screen. Here's a picture of my Model 3, and this is my referral code. Oh, you guys, oh gosh, I hate when people solicit the referral. I'm not really worried about the referral code from the miles, because the miles will probably expire. I won't use them. Here's why I do give my referral code. If Elon Musk is ever going to know who Brian Preston is or Bo Hansen is, I do need you to use the code, because I think that's the only way we're going to get on his radar, because I do at some point, I'm hoping Elon or somebody within Tesla says, you guys obviously like the brand. Come tour the factory. Come out to Fremont. Let's tour it, or wherever they build the Cybertruck factory. That's the goal. I need this show to be so successful that we actually get to go get inside the machine and see how they make these things.
I love it. Let me tell you what I got excited about with this show, Brian. It did change the frame of how I look at Teslas, because I was thinking, I got little kids. I don't want to buy a luxury. I drive a Honda Pilot, and I love my Honda Pilot, and I will have no desire to change it. But now, looking at the economics of it, comparing a Tesla to a Honda, and you better believe I'm going to do the Model Y relative to my Pilot to see how it measures up. It did make me think that perhaps this is more of a main street car than I had thought it was originally. And I think maybe perhaps as time moves on, it will become more and more of a main street car.
So guys, leave us some comments. Let us know what you think. And if this is something that after maybe you get a few months out, under our belts, where we have a few more Tesla Model Ys on the streets, let us know if you want us to do a comparison of the Model Y as well. But I think that this, at least, if anything, will let people, because Tesla doesn't advertise, at least go, let me see what's going on over there. Because it is one of those things where I've never been, because my last car, I drove for 12 years. I mean, I am not a flip a car every few years. I think if you added up all the cars I've personally owned and driven, it's less than 5.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm 46 years old. Yeah. So, I mean, cars, I don't flip a lot of them. So, but this thing has made it's created a change in the way I process. These things are now more technology than they are vehicles because of all the software and everything else. So give us your questions. Give us your comments. We're still a financial show. I know we're probably going to get a few more because when we did the Tesla review shows, we just did that because I was so excited about the product, not because I was trying to become a Tesla YouTuber. But this is one of those things I love that I got to marry my passion for personal finance with what I'm experiencing with this Tesla. So give us your feedback as well as give us ideas you'd like us to run by. But also, if you're maybe one of these Tesla people that just found this because it popped up on your feed, go check out our personal finance content. I'm wired just like you, so you might find that you like it, and you'll want to figure out what the abundance cycle is. You'll want to figure out how you become part of the Money Guy family. But just hang in there. Let us know what you think, and we can't wait to keep creating content. I'm Brian Preston, Bo Hansen, Money Guy team, out.